you on the interview today. There's a lot that has been going on across the globe. There's a lot that is going on the territory. There's a lot that is going on across the diplomatic corridor. And we thought it would be the best thing to do for you to speak directly with the Ambazonian people, for you to talk to them, and also for you to, you rarely have the opportunity to talk to the people where you can interact and take questions from them, address their concerns. You've done it a few times. We also wanted to make sure that today you have the time, the space to be able to interact with the population, especially our people on the ground. So we're excited about this program. By the way, you look very handsome. You look a little bit relaxed today. Let's get started, sir. Recently, about 2 weeks ago, you had one of the biggest diplomatic meeting, and that involves you had a meeting with the government of Switzerland. You had a meet with also the Swiss ambassador, including the government of Norway and some other third parties. After that meeting, you came out, you make some major pronouncements to the Ambazonian people. How are things going?
Thanks for having me. And I'm glad to be able to speak to our people directly. And if they are not, please kindly let me know.
Okay, sir.
All right. Greetings to all Ambazonians, and I send my best wishes to our prisoners of war, our refugees across in Cameroon, the refugees in Biafra, those in Nigeria, and our valiant people on the ground, including our forces. I salute all una, and I hope say una dey fine. Shake no day. Thanks for that question. The essence of my discussion today is to put Ambazonians on the right track and to ensure that in their struggle for freedom, they understand at what stage they are, what they are supposed to do, and how quickly we can end the tyranny of Cameroon in our country. In terms of the question, I will reply some of the substantive issues that you have raised in your question. I met with the special envoy of the Swiss government on the question of and Cameroon and through the mediation of third parties. So those were the people I met with. The background meeting asked the third parties to invite the Swiss envoy, because I've never met him and I've had a secure session discussion with him. And following several months of discussions at different levels, the UN, bilateral discussions, I felt it was important to have face-to-face with the ambassador appointed by the president of Switzerland on this question, to listen to him, provide clarity on exactly where they are with respect to their intentions to facilitate, and for me to bring to his attention certain observations, also to provide a couple of advice that could enable them move forward, also to advise, as I put out, that it will be proper should they not make progress as they to create.
Sir, we're having a little bit of there seems to be an interruption with regard to your system. So maybe look into your connectivity.
I have to just let me switch the system. I have always My apologies to our people on this out. Just give me a moment, please.
We apologize for the interruption based on distance, based on where we are, linking up different parts of our various studios. I'm in the Canadian studio, and President is talking to the Ambazonian people from the Egg of Sea Executive Headquarters in Oslo, Norway. So we have a little bit of a technical challenge. Give us a few minutes, stand by. The President will be right back. And we'll continue. Welcome back, sir.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. I hope it's a bit better now.
It's quite clear.
All right. All right. Let me continue from where I left. Now, this is all through the past few months we have been listening to different narratives about where we are in terms of negotiations and diplomacy. But the truth was exactly far away from what was being put out there. And I'm talking specifically with respect to the intentions of the Swiss to facilitate discussions between Ambazonia and Cameroon. And so, following different discussions with the UN, I think people should recall that I issued a statement informing them that I've cut off discussions with the United Nations. And the reason was simply because following previous discussions, they came in with the erroneous mentality that, there are several Ambazonian groups and it was a bit difficult based on what Cameroon was saying to know exactly who to speak to. And I made it clear that there might be several groups, but I think all of us are united in the idea that there would be some discussions to get Cameroon off our land. And it will be necessary for Cameroon to provide evidence of its commitment to any process that exists. And at one time, the UN came back and said Cameroon was committed but provided no evidence. A few months later, I was called up again for a meeting with the UN envoy, and he brought up a series of issues that were a bit confusing and unacceptable, including asking if the Vatican has reached out and if Cameroon was ready to guarantee my security for discussions in Yaoundé. And I thought that was provocation of the highest order. And I basically made it clear to them that whenever Cameroon is committed, they will discuss with my foreign secretary and invite me and let me know. Otherwise, I don't have much time to be wasting with institutions that should be more proactive in dealing with issues of the occupation of our country. But what I observed also was that the international system was playing us a lot in different systems. It involved different systems working for the same issue, but each one claimed not to know exactly what the others were doing. And that's what I realized. The UN will come into a meeting and ask what the Swiss were doing. And the Swiss will claim not to really know what the UN was doing. And I found it unacceptable that all of them, the big institutions, the European Union, the United Nations, individual countries had made pronouncements accepting the Swiss intention as a way of facilitating discussions between Ambazonia and Cameroon. In the later part, I would explain a bit to the Ambazonian people what this all mean. But let me cut through the chase immediately and speak about the meeting that I had with the Swiss. So following all of these things, I realized the international community was confused and was at a dead end. And I needed to provide clarity. I needed also to get it from them. I needed to be able to get a face-to-face assessment of the reality of where we are and to be able to provide an organizational advice and leadership advice. And that's why I invited the envoy. And I would like to say, I know there has been a lot of social media statements, how I convocated the Swiss now. That sounds a bit arrogant. I respect Bechle, and I'm grateful that at a very short notice, he made the trip with another envoy of the HD. And I'm grateful to them for having accepted to come and have what I call a very fine, very frank, and honest assessment of where we are. And that was not done to undermine anyone. It was done so we can provide to the Ambazonian people clarity on where we are, and so we don't remain in perpetual darkness and hoping against all odds. And I can report, frankly, that the Swiss intention is nowhere. And I say this very clearly and honestly. It's nowhere, not because of the Swiss to a large extent, principally because Cameroon has refused to commit. Let me say this also. Last year, Cameroon was open for discussions. At one time, it felt it was having military advantage over us. After it committed the Kumba massacre, it used that massacre as an excuse to inform the international community that it was no longer interested in having discussions with what it called terrorists. And so it backed out of its own previous intention to at least engage in some form of discussions. The international community also has not been robust enough. It has not shown clarity of purpose, and I will explain this so people understand why. It has not been firm enough. It has not established a credible and respectable system that Cameroon will see and be afraid of and respect. And so I will also explain why they are doing it this way. It is not without precedence. There are historical precedents to show that at this particular stage in struggles for liberation, this is how these things work. And I will explain why. But my meeting with the Swiss envoy was frank and respectable, but honest and clear. And we break away with mutual respect for each other's role. And I promise to still have meetings with them until the time that I think it will be proper for them to step out. And I will go into details about this. And let me clarify this first. We are not opposed to the Swiss leading a framework, but there must be other parties involved. The Swiss are too close to Yaoundé. The Swiss do not have the kind of leverage that it takes to buckle and establish 60-year-old autocracy into some form of understanding. And even if it does, you need more powerful tools to ensure that any agreement is implemented and is respected. And we have provided clarity on how this framework can be established to the extent that it's going to be neutral. It's not going to favor Ambazonia, but it will not favor Cameroon either. But it's going to be respectable and acceptable to both parties. We are also willing to accept if Cameroon can call in another country to be part. But we want to be sure that it is a system with the teeth, not only to facilitate, but also to ensure that any outcome is implemented in a way that is satisfactory to both parties.
At first, when the Swiss made their intention public, your organization, the Governing Council of Ambazonia, shown some form of opposition to it. Some people say, why are you now want to champion the Swiss talks? Why is it that you want to take it over? When at first there was some hesitation. What clarity do you want to provide to the Ambazonian people with regard to this?
No, we are not trying to take. One of the things that Ambazonians should see in this war of liberation, and I'll give parallels. When Seseko emerged, if Ambazonians realized, there was a time I stepped back. I stepped back to see how far he could go. I kept doing what I could do, building a force, but I limited my public outings because there was a lot of what I call rancor. And so when the Swiss issue came up also, we registered our opposition in terms of the framework, in terms of the way it was done. And that opposition still remains there. But we allowed those who have been interested in it to move forward with it. We focus on the defense of our homeland. But that did not mean we were not engaged in discussions at the level of the State Department and even the Vice President. But I was not part of those discussions. I was briefed constantly. At different levels, there were several international meetings, not only with the Swiss, with different stakeholders, parties, states, because we knew we had to somehow give a listening ear. But we allowed those who were interested in it to continue in the leadership of that process, and they are still in the leadership of that process. What I think is necessary now for the leadership of our war of liberation is for me to take over the liberation diplomacy of our struggle. I think we have been able to stabilize defense in such a way it is now at autopilot. The forces can conduct operations independently. They are able to be ingenious in terms of IEDs, in terms of manufacture of several things. They can take care of themselves. It's important for us to give our liberation diplomacy a sense of direction and some level of respectability. And I'll explain this because, as we know in history, and I say this in history, in no liberation struggle have we observed that the oppressed are running to the negotiation table or at this stage are trying to show weakness in terms of their availability in terms of negotiation. It is a weakness that is seized by the oppressor to continue its assault. All through liberation struggles, of the struggles that we have studied, it is the oppressor who adjudges that the economic toll of the resistance, the political capital of the resistance is far overwhelming, that they have to succumb on, that they have to come to the table to reduce the cost on their economy and on their political capital. So when I say it is important for us to provide, as we have done in defense and in the leadership of this struggle, some respectability in a liberation diplomatic approach, it is not synonymous to trying to take over a non-existent process. The SACOs and the ARC are the ones who are in charge and they will remain in charge. But we will provide our wise counsel to any party that has shown its intention to facilitate or mediate between us and La République du Cameroon. And I think Ambazonians should appreciate that.
So basically, if this is really clear to everybody, you're not trying to take the process over. You're not trying to dominate them. You're not trying to say, hey, you guys don't know what you're doing. Let me show you how it's done. What you want to do and what you intend to do and what you are doing is to bring in a level of leadership that is respected. As you've laid out certain conditions. Number one, if the Swiss are the ones that wants to lead a negotiation, if they have the capability or capacity, you've made it very known that the process must be transparent because it started as a backdoor process. That's how it started. It was a backdoor process. The process must be transparent. There must be a level of credibility to the process. He also stated that the process must be multilateral and it must meet basic international standards that have been established by the international system with this type of conflict. Is that what you intend to do? Is this what your meeting with the Swiss envoy was meant these things to make it be known to them, to make these facts, these processes be known to them? Hey, that this is what we think, this is what we think, no matter who you've previously engaged with, but for us, for this to be acceptable to the Ambazonian people, here are certain standards that the process must meet.
I will say two things and broadly. In our struggle for freedom, every strategy has been more of a PR campaign than a substantive strategy for liberation, and that's including diplomacy. How do I outsmart the other? I want to assure you, my intentions was communicated to the Sarkozy. They are the leader of the Swiss intention. Let me make that clear. And what I am doing, my intentions are communicated. I am providing the kind of leadership that is required. And let me bring some context in this. At least from 1945 until now, majority of conflicts, I'm talking about separatist conflicts, have ended either with outright victory or through negotiated settlements. Some have ended on stalemate. Studies have been conducted to show that conflicts, separatist conflicts that end with through negotiated settlements, are likely to reoccur to produce instability and uncertainty. Conflicts that end with outright victory are likely to produce outcomes that are certain and stable. Now, the majority of conflicts that ended with outright victory was between the space of 1945 to 1989. That is during the peak of the Cold War. And the reason was because belligerents in conflict had access to a lot of arms, either from the Soviet bloc or from the capitalist bloc. And if the calculation of one of the supporters was misguided, they abandoned the conflict, which easily led to outright military victory. And during that time, issues of democratization, respect for international norms and human rights did not take precedence over stability and the projection of power. After 1989, the international system, through the United Nations system, including under the leadership of former UN Secretary General Boutros Ghali, prioritized negotiated settlement through the UN framework for peace, peacekeeping, and security. This framework used free market and democratizations as tools to be able to end conflicts. The priority of negotiated settlements over outright victory did not mean that conflicts that ended through negotiated settlements were more stable. It is very important for you to understand why each time there is a conflict, the international system hurriedly comes with, this issue of facilitation. It is a standard practice since under the leadership of Boutros Ghali. Examples are clear. In former Yugoslavia, they entered with this strategy. They signed the Dayton Peace Accord and brought in early elections with the hope that the moderates were going to take over power and continue with their democratization and free market, the hardliners won and continue their domination. The United States intervened. That created the situation of several independent states emerging from former Yugoslavia. So the literature has shown clearly that this particular system that was brought in by the Swiss has not worked without a proper framework that is supposed to guide it. And one of the strategies of this system is to bring the temperature of the conflict down, to give false hope, especially to those who are fighting for independence, that the international system, there is this patronage of the international system. There is this patronage of the white people. When they step into something, we from the South, we immediately think God has stepped into it in our favor. But the priority, there was another studies done later on, I think in the 2000, by different agencies of the United Nations. That studies produced a result that said state stability is critical for international security, for international transaction, for the respect of human rights, for the flourishing of democracy. State stability. So each time there is a conflict, they come straight in to secure the stability of the state. What we call ensuring the survival of the status quo, because they understood that state collapse will lead to massive influx of refugees, massive creating of ungovernable spaces that can be taken over by terrorists, and creating uncertainty in the markets, especially in resource-rich areas. So the primacy of the United Nations in all of conflict areas is to secure the stability of the state. And immediately the Swiss stepped in. We looked at the way they stepped in. We look at the different messages that were being sent, the way we were described, the uncertainty about their mission, lack of mandate, lack of clarity. And we said, hold on. What is your mission? Because based on the literature and based on history, the mission of these early talks is to secure the stability of the state, to ensure continuity in terms of respect for international norms, and to ensure that there is international transactions, they go unperturbed. And these things have informed the way that the Ambazonian Governing Council has leveraged itself on behalf of Ambazonia. First, we had no PR benefit in engaging in some negotiation. There was no PR benefit. For the two IGs, the Splinter and the IG, it was negotiation for them was the reason of their existence. And so they could simply jump into something to achieve early PR over the other. And it is always critical in a contested space like the Ambazonian struggle that you step back on certain issues to give those interested a chance to show their worth, while you can engage in background discussions to make sure that you can, on behalf of our people, provide information, advice, and we have done. We have we've provided enough advice to the United Nations. We did not just oppose. We have given the formula of South Sudan. In the South Sudan negotiations, you had the United States, the United Kingdom, and Norway. Norway has the most experience in negotiations concerning self-determination, but it doesn't have the leverage and power to influence state parties to be able to come to the table. And in most times when Norway has been engaged in discussions, it has used the muscles of the United States, because Norway has always acted as intermediary even between the US and NATO. Norway is the one also that played an important role in the negotiation between the Taliban and the United States. Norway has played an important role in the negotiations between the FARC rebels of Colombia and the Colombian government. It has a repertoire, a reservoir of rich background. And so in our discussions with international parties, we have provided case studies that could be used. And that was also a test of their sincerity and their honesty. Do you want a credible process with an outcome that produces stability, an outcome that is respected by both parties? This is the formula. It is not a formula that the Ambazonian Governing Council is creating, but it's a formula used in case A, it's a formula used in case B. In the conflict between the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland, you had the United States involved. You had Senator Mitchell, who also has an Irish background, under Bill Clinton, who has an Irish background. The US came not only with the muscle, but also with the assurance, because Ireland is Catholic. Bill Clinton is Catholic. And so Ireland supported Northern Ireland because it saw it as part of its own country. The United Kingdom is more Presbyterian, right? And so Ireland was comfortable having the United States as a Catholic kind of system with Bill Clinton in place to be able to go into discussions with the United Kingdom, knowing fully well that it had not much to lose. So when you get Ambazonia, an Anglo-Saxon background, you get a Swiss with its trilingualism and more French prone, more Cameroon prone, had business interests. How do you expect such a country single-handedly, without a balance, to facilitate discussion with a country that is so close to? It is absurd. No country in the world will accept that. No country in the world will. Even the Palestinians that enter into discussions with Israel, though the United States is playing a very important role, the Palestinians have always ensured that a country like Egypt and other Arab countries are part of the discussions as part of their own leverage. And so what we have done is to be able to attempt to establish a framework that is acceptable to us. And I think we will continue to do that and provide the kind of leadership that is required in times like this. But we have no intention of taking over any particular intention by any other country. Once we have established that framework that is acceptable, the Ambazonian people, through the formula that I have articulated many times, political leadership, expert-led negotiators, our social media people, our defense coming together to talk as one people. Once, and to talk as the people who want independence. Because don't forget, and I will talk about the case of East Timor. Case of East Timor, where there were 3 political parties. When Indonesia invaded, 2 of the political parties gave the mandate to Indonesia to invade East Timor, to drive out the other political, the Frelimo that stood purposely for independence. So we want to be sure that everyone on the negotiation table on the side of Ambazonia has one option, only one option, that of independence. Without that, the Ambazonian Governing Council will negotiate alone, to defend the interests of the Ambazonian people. And we know, as we did with self-defense, that others will catch up to align with the aspirations of our people.
So by providing this leadership, you know, there was a report that was published about 2 months ago by the World Bank giving critical revelations that pointed to the direction of the Swiss talks. According to this document, the World Bank, is stated that the IG group was behind the scenes, talking to Cameroon, accepting federation as an outcome. I want to ask you this question. What would your leadership do when Sako and Chris Anu and the assembled called ACT decided to stand up and say they want federation?
You see,
I know you are not expecting this question, but we have to ask.
Yes. You know, I don't want to speak for people, and
it's a big concern. This is
yes,
a global report.
It is a concern. It is a concern. What I know is that they will pivot for independence. But what I also know is that other options are possible for them. You know, that is the basis of the report. I don't think they would. Their actions, you know, enables, you know, colonialism. Their public posture enables colonialism, and that is known. But I also think that some of them stand for independence. But what I also know is uh, federalism is also an option for them. Yes, which is not for us. We have one option. That's independence. That's why, and the World Bank report is clear about that. And that can also be seen in the way we conduct ourselves in terms of public liberation diplomacy, trying as much as possible to establish a framework that, you know, can secure independence. I'm not sure whether they know what they are doing. I'm not sure if, you know, they have the expertise, you know, to be able to know how to conduct themselves in times like the moment. I rely on the expertise of my top advisors, and also trying to study a lot about how others did it. And I'm confident that our position, what is described as hardline position, is going to sway the majority of some of these agitators to align with the aspirations expressed by the Ambazonian people in many surveys, including that of Cardinal Toomey, CDN, and others. So I don't want to go into some of these issues, but Ambazonians are fighting and dying for independence, and anyone that keeps alternative ideas, I mean, you're going to find yourself really wanting like some of the agitators before.
So basically, in summary, your leadership, the engagement with the Swiss, the meeting with Bachelet and other international third parties was to protect the interest of the Ambazonian people, to make sure that deviated from what our people are dying and suffering.
Let me say something here. What is going on is very interesting, and we are smart. You see, it's possible. It would have, when you study the Swiss intention, it would have been possible for me to come out early on and say, hey, get the hell out. Unacceptable, get the hell out. Because, and we would have been right, because it was just an attack on us. But we sat behind and looked at the importance of maintaining what are called having an international eye on the conflict. If we immediately dismiss and eliminated, you know, the Swiss intention, without having another country immediately aligning to take over that space, you wouldn't have what they call the international concern and focus. And so we took a strategic decision that, don't we know, you know, the Swiss shouldn't even be in a position to facilitate discussion between us and Cameroon. Honestly, They should not have even been. It's like asking France or any, pro-La Republic, Serbia, to facilitate. But we took a strategic decision to say, what is the immediate alternative that keeps the Ambazonian struggle in the limelight of the international system? We didn't have. We had ideas, but they have not been committed. As long as the Swiss have shown intention, no other country is stepping forward until they step out. So we allow them and engage. Our interaction with them also was able to let them know who we are, what kind of country we want to build, the kind of leadership that we provide. And I think we give some respectability to the Ambazonian people. And I think this strategy has worked very well for Ambazonia. It might not have worked well for the A Gulf C, because the real thing that would have worked for the A Gulf C was to eliminate the Swiss immediately. But it would have also defeated one pillar of our liberation strategy: targeted diplomacy and internationalization. The Swiss presence was internationalizing our struggle. They were mobilizing countries to be able to have support. They were getting countries make public statements, and international non-governmental organizations making public statements. That was keeping the Ambazonian struggle in the international limelight. And that was irritating Cameroon a lot, that had wanted this thing to be some domestic feud between us and the so-called Northwest and Southwest, that he could use his domestic law to adjudicate. So we played it well, and I think it has been for the best interest of our people. And what the others,
but why did you give the Swiss a timeline?
All right.
That by the end of the year, if their intention is not actualized in anything concrete, then they should make their intentions public, that they have been unsuccessful to get Cameroon to commit. They have been unsuccessful to leverage the international system to something that can advance the process. Why did you give them a timeline?
You see, for two reasons. What I know up to this moment makes me to believe that the Cameroon has no respect for Switzerland. Cameroon has no respect for Switzerland. I don't want to go into the details of the discussion. As a leader, and also as a scholar, I avoid nuances. I have what I call evidence-based leadership approach to issues. And sometimes I take it slowly, because there is a lot of information out there that is based on rhetoric and lack of proper evidence. And so based on what I have analyzed, there were tough questions I asked, and I got straightforward answers, which I'll leave it to that. But based on what we know, we've come to the conclusion that, there's no respectability, and I don't think the Swiss are willing to push the button. We have provided some talking points, as I would say. I will leave it to that also. But
okay.
Now, this is what we need to know. We are strong enough at this stage in our liberation war to get a credible process to ask Cameroon to vacate its last forces. We have established an independent state through blood and suffering. We control our territory. We are erecting prototype institutions that are critical for the future of our country. Community schools are ongoing. A viable military across our 13 states. We have all what it takes, to be recognized as an independent nation: the human resource, the natural resource. And if you have a robust system, it is going to compel Cameroon to either come to the table and talk, or push the button to the point of, hey, we'll recognize Ambazonia as an independent state to help, them get the IDPs who've been suffering, get schools reopened completely, and to get our suffering people back into a life of normalcy. And we think it is time that that process is established. And we think if the Swiss are unable, they should respectably step aside and allow another country to step forward. I know sometimes it's about timing. Another country might step in and still meet a stubborn Cameroon unwilling to commit. And you might still be having the same issues. But maybe that country is going to be more vocal. Maybe that country is going to have the kind of leverage. For example, it needed the United States and the international system to target Omar al-Bashir using the International Criminal Court to indict him, to put the pressure on Omar al-Bashir to crack Sudan. Maybe another country will do that. Maybe another country will still come and find the stalemate. Maybe another country will come and win the respect of Cameroon and see seriousness and get it to commit to begin talks on its vacation of our country. It is time that the world recognizes that Ambazonia is no longer part of Cameroon, will never be part of Cameroon, and rather than allow the conflict to prolong, should step in through a negotiated settlement and get Cameroon out. But I also want to remind our people that this is just an illusion that I'm propagating. Am I sure that's going to happen? I am 95% not sure. What I am sure about is what the literature says and what the Ambazonian people have proven, that we have the capability to defeat Cameroon and achieve outright military victory and negotiate with Cameroon on our own terms. And that is a focus that our people must have as a primacy in their strategic toolbox to ending Cameroon's occupation. But because we must remain part of an international system, we must continue to provide the kind of leadership that is respected, a leadership that is admired, a leadership that will be seen post-independence as one that can be dealt with.
Let's move to defense. You laid out a compelling, attractive, pragmatic strategy for the liberation of Ambazonia. You promised the Ambazonian people independence declared means that independence must be defended for the occupier to take you serious, for the international system to take you serious. You laid out a clear defense strategy. A couple of months ago, you also told the Ambazonian people that Cameroon has been defeated. Where are you in terms of the defeat of Cameroon, and where are you moving things in this current state?
Now, this is what I would like to say. In declaring independence, there is no certainty of success, but there is some level of preparedness in terms of how to defend that independence. There is even some strategy on how to get countries to accept that independence. When Biafra declared independence, it was recognized immediately by more than 7 countries. 7 countries: Ivory Coast, Gabon, Tanzania, then Rhodesia, South Africa. And it was given some level of acceptability by countries like France, Norway included. It had already established a defense mechanism to defend an independence declared. That's how the international community determines whether you are serious about what you're talking about or not. And I don't come here to chastise anybody. It's a collective failure of the Ambazonian people and leadership. And it's something that we must accept. Independence declared must be defended because it's a test of the will of the oppressor. It is a test of the stability of the international system. It's not a joke. It is not Western democracies where you declare your intentions to be independent like the Scots and invoke premises of constitution like the Ethiopian constitution guarantees the right to self-determination. So if it's a state in Ethiopia wants to break free, it might invoke that premise of that constitution and ask for a referendum, or like Scotland did and ask for a referendum. But if you are operating within an established autocracy that cannot even accept students to clamor for simple reforms, that will brutalize teachers who ask for French not to be used in their classrooms, or detain and humiliate lawyers who simply want the common law system to be respected, you should be sure that if you want to alter the destiny of the political structure, you must be prepared, not only because you need to protect the lives of your people, but also to convey seriousness at the level of the international system. And we failed our people in that. And that's why I set out immediately to say, rather than complaining and attacking people for making a mistake, we must make sure that we establish a credible force that can project power and begin to defend our country block by block. And we did that. And since then, we have continuously improved on the sophistication of the force, knowing fully well that we are on our own, having enemies on both sides who are collaborating to kidnap and rendition our people. And I have made no qualms. The first time we assaulted the system, I was on Radio France to accept responsibility in order to define the narrative, to show our people that we are willing to defend them and we are willing to take responsibility and that we are willing to go to jail for it, no matter where we are sitting. That clear leadership inspired our people to rise up in different blocks and establish themselves as self-defense groups in the defense of their neighborhood. It gave them pride for the first time that they are in charge. And since that fateful day, our people have been in charge of their destiny. We've had setbacks because of schisms within our own body politics. But so far, our defense forces have held sway over La Republic. And when I talk about our defense forces, I'm not only talking about those who receive command and control from my office, but all others who have been doing a wonderful job to make sure that they bring the battle to Cameroon, they impose a higher cost on their presence, and to humiliate them and to give pride back to the Ambazonian people. It is because of that clarity in leadership, clarity in strategy, and a focus on the hopes, the goodness, and the kindness of our people. At this stage of our struggle, as I said before, we have gained military superiority over Cameroon. We have taken over vast sway of territories. We control many states in both static and dynamic fashion. Our forces are not only consolidating, as you would see in the coming weeks, the expansion of our forces in different areas, the takeover of Moklete, I hope I pronounce it right, the establishment of governing institutions in places like Tali, Besali, in places like Upper Banyang, in different areas, schools going, what you see No Pity also doing, a new dynamism in terms of assaulting the enemy, humiliating them publicly, giving Ambazonians hope, courage, and pride. And every action taken by an Ambazonian unit wherever is copycatted across the territory. Because for them, it's not only about defending, it's a source of pride. We've never had pride. We've always been on the side of humiliation. We've been on the side of death. We've been on the side of defeat. And for the first time in our miserable existence, young men, women from nowhere untrained are able to rally themselves within their blocks and are able to fight and die, bleed and go to jail for the interests of 8 million Ambazonians. And we've achieved this milestone because of clarity in terms of our strategic positioning, clarity in terms of how we want this thing done. And this is where we are. At this stage of our liberation struggle, and I said this before, you might not immediately have the kind of situation that you saw in Afghanistan, where the US is flying people out, or what we saw in Saigon, where they were dropping helicopters in the sea. Our forces continuing their assault on Cameroon military is creating social tension within Cameroon, is getting Cameroonians to begin to question the ability of their government to protect their children in a foreign land, is getting Cameroonians begin to question why their kids should die for a corrupt oligarchy that gives them nothing. I said early on, we will recreate the kind of situation that happened in Ethiopia, where there is so much social tension, or the kind of situation that happened in the United States, domestic uproar asking the US to withdraw from Vietnam. We are seeing the crack. Cameroonians are questioning. They are speaking out. Cameroonian soldiers who find IEDs are thanking God that they live to see another day. We need to increase that tension. It also creates a positive atmosphere, a sense of cohesion, a sense of hope, a sense of unity within the Ambazonian political space. It makes our people to invest more, to believe more, to hope more. And our forces must continue to assault. It brings in new recruits who believe that the end is near. Cameroon is bankrupt. It is now under an IMF regime that is terrible. If we continue with the IEDs, the assault, the machine gun brigades, the RPG brigades, it will not only project power, it will send a powerful message to Cameroonians. Your children have been dying in vain. And by creating that social tension within Cameroon, we create the space for an uproar. Don't forget, and I'll say this when I go into the Biafran discussion, leadership in liberation struggle must be very strategic. Very strategic. It's not emotional. It's not emotional. There are things going on that when history will let you know, you will be shocked on how we pull this. I know that everything we do is put under the mirror because of the schisms amongst us. But everything we do, there is a precedence in history, how others did it, why they succeeded. And Ambazonians must trust in the strategic thinking of this leadership, that we provide for them the best tool to end the tyranny of Cameroon in the shortest period of time. It has nothing to do with Dr. Cho Ayaba, has virtually nothing to do with the Ambazonian Governing Council. It has something to do with Ambazonia.
And that's something to do with Ambazonia producing results, the inspiration on the ground, the commitment of our people, the commitment on Ghost Town, the commitment of the forces, their own leadership. Forces are taking control of the ground. Forces are just becoming very inventive. And so we are very grateful for the leadership you've been able to provide to the Ambazonian people and for what's going on the ground. Recently, the colonial state, Cameroon, and its best friend, Nigeria, they had a conference against the Ambazonian people. After the 3 days conference, they came out and made a joint declaration that they're against secession. And some internal competitors have taken advantage of this and have actually launched a full campaign against your leadership in favor of Nigeria, in favor of Cameroon Nigerian collaboration, against the Ambazonia, Ambazonia Biafra alliance. They've complained that because you got into an alliance, the governing council of Ambazonia got into an alliance with the leader of the Biafran liberation, that this alliance is very negative to the Ambazonian people. It's not good for the Ambazonian people. It's created insecurity for Ambazonians. What's your take on the Cameroon-Nigerian alliance against Ambazonia?
I thought they had an alliance before. You see, in establishing alliances during a liberation period, what you should be looking at are the benefits of such an alliance. Ambazonia is basically a nation fighting on its own. The entire African continent has been silent in the face of an ongoing genocide. Even African superboy Kagame, who was, when he was president of AU, did nothing. The entire continent has been silent. Patriots of the continent that would have stood up for us have been murdered. And so Ambazonia needs to establish relationships with peoples that can help it foster the outcome that our people desire. And one of such peoples are the Biafran people. I know, remember when we were growing up, we say you are wicked as a Jew. We had stereotypes in history. We all saw the Jews as wicked, as cruel and stuff, and every bad person we saw it as wicked as a Jew. We also saw the Biafrans from a very negative perspective. Very negative perspective. Very few people have taken time to realize that these are people who declared independence and got, I think, Portugal, Norway, France, and others to be able to accept its existence. And so this must inform the decisions we make about the friends that we want to make with respect to our independence. All through history, peoples who fought for independence made friends. Sometimes they made friends with nations and states that were enemies to powerful neighbors. In the struggle by the ANC, Angola was divided into two between the United States and Russia. You had South Africa was involved in that conflict. The ANC that was fighting against the South African government made friends with parties in Angola that were enemies, to the United States. They knew that America was going to provide more support to South Africa because of such alliances. They made friends with Zambia. Zambians knew the consequences in terms of their territorial integrity in supporting the ANC because South Africa actually bombed Zambian territory. In the struggle for liberation, there are consequences in alliances you make, but you must weigh whether the best interests of the outcome you seek will be served by that alliance than a hypothetical fear of an already existing alliance between, the two neighbors. Whether we entered into an alliance with Biafra or not, Nigeria would have still supported Cameroon. And let Ambazonians know that one of the reasons why the international system is hesitant in recognizing countries or nations fighting for independence is because most countries have nations within them that are seeking independence. And there is a fear that if you recognize one, it might give hope to the other one inside you. And so the only time that such countries come to recognize is when, you know, they have international interests. So in everything we do, you know, there are consequences. We establish an alliance with the Basque, knowing fully well that the Spanish government to increase, you know, support for Cameroon. We establish alliances with different people. Ambazonians were asking for an alliance with Taiwan. What would have been the consequences if China increased its support to Cameroon? So in every alliance you establish, there are some negative consequences. But in our alliance with Biafra, there are overwhelming positives. Are the only people within the continent of Africa that stand to recognize us as a people fighting for self-determination. They are our only friendly neighbor, the only friendly neighbor. It would be wrong and naive not to establish a relationship with the only friendly neighbor that is also clamoring for its own right to self-determination. Most importantly, if Abuja establishes an alliance, kidnaps our people, rendition them, and has an internal agitation, we are going to establish a relationship with that internal agitator. Any country that supports Cameroon against Ambazonia must make sure that they don't have a domestic opposition agitating. We will provide support to that domestic opposition. Any country that does so, we will provide support to that domestic opposition to make sure that they can destabilize or unseat the present government that is supporting Cameroon committing genocide. I know most people have talked about the relationship between our alliance and the security of our refugees. Now, our refugees have been in position of insecurity for a long time. A few months ago, or almost a year ago, I addressed a message to the governor of Cross River. I addressed appealing to him after they had made public statements that there was now security in Amazonia and that our people should return. I addressed an audio message to him, appealing to him to make sure that he provides protection to our people. That was before the alliance. Individual refugees have been subjected to brutality. Nigeria has permitted incursions into Biafra land and has attacked our refugees. Now, in a nutshell, we stand to benefit more in an alliance with Biafra than any negatives, temporal negatives. Nigeria has an obligation under international law to protect our people. It will be violating that sacred obligation by, you know, violating the rights of our people. We should also send a message to Nigeria that the international system works on a quid pro quo basis. You have your people in our land, we have our people in your land. And if you provide protection, you can ensure that your own people receive protection in our country. So our people must be assured that we have taken careful steps in establishing this alliance. We have thought about all of these things that people are saying publicly. We've thought about them. We have weighed the odds. I have received wise legal counsel from one of the finest minds in our struggle and beyond on the benefit of this. In the event, which I think that will be soon, of the recognition of our state, the only neighboring people that would have been for us would have been the Biafrans. The people we are thinking of establishing cross-border trade worth billions and billions of amber with the Biafrans. And so we must make our intentions clear at this particular moment. We cannot be hypocritical. We cannot play with the lives of other people's clamoring for independence. We can never, never be seen as betraying other people in their times of need. And this has not been done for any PR stuff. The PR effect itself has been positive. The conference of the death that took place in Nigeria was laughable. It's inconsequential. As I said, the mastermind of the kidnapping of Seseko is from Borno State. His own state has been overrun by Boko Haram. Boko Haram has top officials as governors, as senators that are controlling the Nigerian government. Do they really have the resources? Do they have the might to be able to stop Ambazonia? Well, as history has shown, Ambazonia has prevailed against any power that has declared war against it and that has promised to eliminate us in 2 weeks. Nigeria should not make the mistake of Cameroon. It should release Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, engage in discussions on the aspirations of the Biafran people, and stop playing comedy by threatening Ambazonia.
You've also recently announced a resettlement program for Ambazonian refugees based on the insecurity imposed by the Buhari government and the insecurity within Nigeria itself. Is this something that will benefit just Ambazonian refugees in Nigeria, or this is something that is the refugee resettlement program is something that is going to benefit Ambazonians in other unsafe countries?
I have just appointed Akoson Raymond as the Secretary for Human Rights and Humanitarian Affairs, and he has begun work on my new policy of refugee resettlement. Yesterday, we provided the first 10 names of refugees to the office of Comrade Akoson Raymond, and I have opened discussions with some third parties to make sure that we can promote this project. Comrade Akoson will be meeting with all the heads of missions of the AGOFC across the globe to make sure that they can be involved in this. I'm damn serious. We have not been serious. We have not been serious. I don't, and I say this as I said in my audio. I know Dr. Akwanga reacted, but I think that was simply an aside. When we had prisoners taken in 1997, our first priority was to see that they break jail. We had prisoners taken in Bamenda. We got them out. We got a prisoner out from Bamenda. Because our first priority as liberation fighters is to ensure that when the enemy cages our prisoner, we find the best and easiest way to break jail. We cannot be caged, so that is the first priority. And secondly, when our refugees, when our people move in secure countries, it's the obligation of leadership to see to it that they can facilitate further immigration to third safe countries, and we have failed to do that. And I don't think it's because of bad faith; it's because of lack of knowledge. Leadership is not provided with the kind of advice and tools to be able to see this as a possibility. And I brought in the Akwanga case as a clear example. And I say this again, that when Akwanga, we got him out of Kondengi, I flew into Nigeria immediately. I still have a video that I asked him to record in the toilet in a hotel in Abuja. I took that video, traveled back to Germany. I went to the Belgian Foreign Ministry. I met with their humanitarian services. I played that video and I told them, this is the leader of the SCYL. Look how he looks. He is now in Nigeria under insecurity, and it will be my wish that he is moved out. They asked how many of them. There were 35. And the Belgian said it will be impossible to move all, but that they could deal with Dr. Akwanga. But we didn't accept that proposition. And immediately we also started working on the possibility of UN resettlement program. So we did that, and all of them moved. Everyone was moved from Nigeria. As I said, the UN resettlement program is a core pillar of the United Nations of the UNHCR mandate. Last year alone, they moved 6,000 DRC persons, 1,300 Somalians, 2,000 Eritreans. Now we have Ambazonians living in insecurity. There is a clear evidence of refugees being kidnapped and renditioned to Yaoundé. There's clear evidence of cross-border attacks on our refugees. Clear evidence of threat on our refugees that could invoke the fourth pillar of the UNHCR to ensure that they are resettled in places where they are secure. And it is the obligation of leadership to make sure this happens. And it's an obligation that I have taken. As I have said, in most areas of our struggle, when I find negative competition, I step back. When these persons were moved into Biafra land and Nigeria by the brutality of Cameroon, I sent an envoy, and the attack on the envoy and the message I sent to our refugees is not to see yourself in too much pain and suffering as perpetual victims, but see yourself as ambassadors of the millions who have not been able to flee. See yourselves as spokespeople of the battered people of Ambazonia. See yourself as a new generation of refugees like the Madeleine Albright who left the Czech Republic and became the U.S. Secretary of State, or like Henry Kissinger who became the U.S. Secretary of State. See yourself in that light, because that's how I saw myself. Bunkered down for 3 years in an asylum camp, going to jail, as a refugee. So I have this tendency not to treat people perpetually as victims, but see them as asset. And once I got this opposition about refugees in Nigeria having been divided between people, I step back. And I think it's time for me to provide leadership also in that area. And I'm glad that I am in talks with some of the refugees, and the AGOVC should be providing some humanitarian assistance, but the overriding strategy is to ensure that we can get them out of that insecurity in the shortest time possible. And I pray to God Almighty that we can succeed.
In the next 3 weeks will be Ambazonian Independence Day. The forces on the ground, I know that there are serious preparations going on. There are serious preparations going on across the territory. How is Ambazonians celebrating their Independence Day at this juncture of our struggle? How significant is this?
It is huge. It is huge. It is huge. The day of our birth, is the day of our existence as a people with their flag and anthem. It is huge, coming out from so many years of darkness and uncertainty. It is huge considering the blood that has been spilled to be able to make this a possibility. It is huge considering the enthusiasm and happiness in the Amazonian people to be free. Our Independence Day is a day to remind ourselves of our sacred obligation as a people, to stand for our country, and to remind ourselves of the thousands of lives that have been lost in the pursuit of this noble goal. Our Independence Day is reminding us of the sacrifices still being made by those locked up in jail, the refugees we are talking of, the IDPs in the bushes. It's the day we remind ourselves that there is an international border that divides us with La Republic of Cameroon and Biafra land. It is a day that reminds us of our flag, the beauty and majesty of our flag. It's a day that must go down in the minds of every Ambazonian as a day of the great patriots who stood and laid their lives for our country. And I encourage every citizen, wherever you may be, to go and look at yourself in the mirror, raise your flag, sing your anthem, hit your chest, and be proud to be an Ambazonian. We are the finest breed of people on planet Earth. In the darkest moment of our lives, our oppressors have not been able to push us to the point of bestiality. In the darkest moment of our lives, even in our own quarrels and schisms, we have still been able to wear a smile in our struggles. You've given one of the greatest laughters on television, even in pain. And we must fly our flag in remembrance of the general evils, those who have died, and giving hope to all those in prison that they will come home soon. Telling our forces that this is victory that has been given to us by them. The theme, I remind our people, defeated, live now. Defeated, live now. And I spoke of this also when I talked about diplomacy, when I talked about why I had to engage the Swiss, that I am convinced from the depth of my heart that the end for Cameroon has come. And we need to trigger the mechanism that will get the international system to accept that reality. We must project power, we must project force, we must keep aside our differences for that one day, raise our flag as high as possible, sing our anthem in our loudest voice, wear our greatest outfit wherever we may be, and thank all those who have fought so valiantly hard for our country. It is Independence Day, people. Independence Day on the 1st of October.
All right. Thank you very much for the clarity you've been able to provide to the Ambazonian people and for such insights that you've given our people. The public would like to ask you questions. We've made a slot so that you can interact directly. We hope that people from Ground Zero will be able to call, that are listening in, will be able to call, ask their question to the leader regarding any aspect of our liberation. So if the studio can help us to project the phone number that people can call on WhatsApp and they can call directly, we'll be very grateful.
Power on. Bluetooth pairing. Bluetooth connected.
All right. The lines are open for all of you that have the phone number, which is a +1 905 782 0911. Will be projected on the screen for all of you. It's also on the flyer, so you can call that phone number directly. You can also call through WhatsApp. For those of you on Facebook, you can call through my Facebook, and we'll be able to answer. We'll be able to take your questions. Here are the rules. Make your question very short. Make your question very precise. Please, civil. We're civil people. Be civil. You have only 2 minutes for your comment, including your question. Those are the rules. Studio, okay. The number is it's on the screen for everyone. So the lines are open for everybody. We've had a few calls. People have been calling while the lines why the program was going on. All right, let's take this call from the United States of America. Hello?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for taking my call. I have a question for Dr. Ayaba. Dr. Ayaba, at one time, you projected videos of some people who you said were the killers of Florence Ayafo. But today, we have 2,000 Cameroonians who are in Consolidation prison, for that same crime. So my question to you is, who are the people who killed Florence Ayafo that you showed on the pictures that you have arrested? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks for that. I'm not sure about 2,000 Cameroonians in Kondegi for that. The briefing I received on the death of Ayafo, we also launched an investigation and got some persons involved, and we have clarified the situation, that we have used our internal mechanisms to engage in some disciplinary measures. And in terms of liberations, there are limitations imposed on us to be able to take far-reaching measures when crimes are committed. And we will continue to make sure that we impose some penalties when crimes are committed, and also engage in rehabilitation of soldiers through education and some other kinds of measures.
Thank you very much, sir. Let's take this call from, let's call this person back who's calling from South Africa.
Hello, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Evening.
Do you have a question?
You're speaking to.
Do you have a question for Dr. Ayaba?
That's correct.
Go ahead, sir. He's listening.
Okay. I greet you all in the wonderful name of our Lord Jesus. I want to thank Dr. Cho Ayaba for his wonderful presentation and the session he has just completed. My question goes this. I would like the leader of a war of independence, Mr. Dr. Cho Ayaba, to give us a brief on the whole state of our readiness to govern as we get into this phase of the struggle, and to give us how much of the territory that we control, so that we can boost our egos. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's take this other call from Ground Zero so that you can answer both questions.
All right.
Hello, comrade from Ground Zero. How are you doing? All right. It's having some connections issues. So you probably want to take that question while we wait for others.
Thanks a lot, comrade. Thanks for your question. I think the issue of governance, I wouldn't say we are 100% gonna be ready anytime, but I think we have the experience, we have the expertise, and we are building also the kinds of alliances that will help us be able to establish the kind of infrastructural development that is critical for, Ambazonia at the early stages of our independence. We are also working on different prototype systems that we think will be able to be introduced in our country, that is going to help us, stabilize the situation. We are collecting a lot of data. We need enough data that will be used to be able to determine specific policies in different areas. So we have already begun to do certain things that would help us during the period of transition, but we will still need a lot of support from countries that have the best interests of Ambazonia at heart. Don't forget, and I keep reminding all of our people, that the creation of the liberal states has been a huge mistake for the continent of Africa. The marketization and liberalization strategy of Western democracy has not, because it is devoid of context. And most African countries have been dished pseudo-political independence while economic uh, oppression and occupation is still continuing. And our struggle is intended to establish an indigenous state that is rooted in the context of our Ambazonia, that is not going to be easily overthrown, that is also going to adopt economic strategies that takes into consideration the human and natural resources that we are endowed with. We are having an assessment on all of these things. We are looking at immediate projects that will be necessary for to kickstart our country. For example, where are we going to have an airport? What kind of airport? We have looked at different countries, different designs, the importance of a seaport for the movement of goods, the development of the infrastructure of our country. Who are the cream of our engineers, specific in different areas? And that holds well too for issues of political institutions. As I said on issues of diplomacy when I talked about experts, you will need experts even in designing the kind of political systems that will ensure that we have a stable political space for economic development. We are not asleep. I can assure you that we are working extremely very hard to make sure that, once we are free and our state is recognized, we are kicking immediately. We don't have time for rethinking what kind of system we are going to put in place. And I am very sure that in the work we do today, we are going to establish the stable space, tap into our natural resources and human resources, both at home and in the diaspora, establish an educational system that is going to, for example, be rooted in the socioeconomic and political realities. If you study our draft curriculum of education, it lays the foundation for the kind of education that is going to be very, very critical for economic development. So I think we are doing our best in that field. But for all of these things to become reality, we need data to be able to formulate specific policies that are also applicable. With respect to territorial control, I think we have increased our territorial control. Cameroon has been packing out of different places. I can say we are controlling more than 80% of our land. And for the first time, we are having static control. I don't want to go into details because it has security consequences. We are having static control at this particular moment. And we need to begin to work on the kinds of systems that we will be introducing. I know the World Council of the Hague of Sea, the chairman is very interested in building institutions. We are looking at different institutions that bring our forces, bring our communities to begin doing things and ensuring that they can also raise revenue from within to engage in developing not only community schools, building bridges that are critical infrastructures for our communities, ensuring refurbishing of health centers, which are important for healthy population. So we will be running a system that will be community based in the interregnum, hoping that we can up the ante as we have more control and can guarantee the security of our population.
A lot of people have been calling from the ground. We've missed a couple of calls, so we'll take a few calls and then the leader will answer all the questions at once. Let's call some people back, especially people calling from the ground. All right, let's take this call. Hello. Hello?
Hello, Pete.
Good evening, comrade.
Yes, sir.
Yes, go ahead. Would you listen? And the leader of the year you find.
I want to acknowledge the setup.
All right. For place where you day, your communication be very poor. Your network be very poor. Try again. Call back. Hello?
Hello?
Yep. Good evening.
Good evening, sir. I want to give a question to the leader of our liberation, Dr. Cho Ayaba.
All right. Right on.
Yes, I want to talk about the situation of the refugees. Of course, I really personally appreciate so much what he has been doing so far, because I follow keenly, even though a lot of us don't show ourselves, because of some reasons and the regions we find ourselves. Now, I'm calling all the way from the United Arab Emirates. A lot of us here are more of refugees. Like we are hiding because a lot of Ambazonians here are living without papers. A lot are living without papers and are facing such situations. They cannot get jobs. They cannot live in homes. They're living with constant fear because they are afraid that one day the police may take them and they will be deported. So, has the leader has anything in mind for such people around the world, especially in countries where they cannot give asylum to asylum seekers like the United Arab Emirates?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. We'll take another question, and then the leader will combine the questions and answer them. Let's call this comrade who's been calling from the United States.
Hello?
Good afternoon, Mr. Zion Watchman.
Good afternoon, PS, and greetings to Dr. Ayaba Cho.
He's listening.
Yes, I want to start a precedent and then I ask my question. I want to start by the murder of General Ayaba.
Can you
watch a series and a consistent sequence of murder and elimination of our generals on the ground?
Comrade.
I want to start with General Ayaba and many other generals that have been killed, including Nginyam and the Wu-39, and recently the 2 ADF soldiers that were killed. So my question is, what is Dr. Ayaba doing to ensure that our generals are not persistently being killed and massacred and our heroes sent to their early graves? Because we haven't received any statement on how those who cooperated or orchestrated the murder of General Ayaba have been dealt with, either from the diaspora or on the ground, and even those who massacred the Wu-39, and even those who killed the recent 2 soldiers of the ADF in Bui. So what is the leader doing to ensure that we can take out these cancers, these scavengers that are killing and murdering our heroes, starting with the soldiers on the ground who are taking those foolish commands, and even those who are giving the orders from the diaspora? What is he doing to ensure that we don't continue to lose our soldiers, our brothers, and our patriots, so as to ensure that we have people who fight and live to enjoy the freedom they are fighting for, not being killed by our own instead of our enemy like Republic of Cameroon? And then my second question to him is, what is he doing to ensure that we can inflict a triple or a double or a quadruple pain on Cameroon, not just in Ambazonia, but in the land of Cameroon, given that they are coming to us to kill us? Why has he not implemented the blueprint declaration that said we could take the war to Cameroon?
Thank you.
Lastly, but not the least,
thank you very much. Your 2 minutes. Your 2 minutes are up. We have a lot of calls coming in. Let him take the first 2 questions. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah. To the question on refugees, I feel really appalled by the situation of Ambazonians in the UAE, and it's something that I want to look into personally. I want to look at the UAE constitution with respect to its obligation under the 1951 Convention, the 1967 Bellagio Protocol. Normally, under international law, when people escape countries and cross international border, the host countries have an obligation to provide them with asylum. And it is my understanding that in some countries, including I think Japan, that the process is non-existent. And I will look into it, comrade, critically, and I would advise my Secretary for Human Rights and Humanitarian Affairs to reach out to you people, and then we might reach out to the UAE and to be able to highlight the plight of Ambazonians that are living there. We have a lot of support schemes that we can provide. Expert advice to all those Ambazonians who are fleeing and seeking asylum in different cases. Our Human Rights Department has been providing services to Ambazonians across the globe. If you are an Ambazonian, wherever you may be, before you ever seek asylum, reach out to the leadership of the AGOFC, especially the Department of Human Rights and Humanitarian Affairs. Get expert advice on how to proceed with either the oral or written application. It is critical because your first statements are critical in determining whether you stay or you will be denied asylum. We should also know, even if you are a student in a particular place, it is sometimes difficult after your studies to return to a country ravaged by war, where anyone coming from abroad is seen as an activist. You have the right to seek and to receive protection in any country, and the Ambazonian Governing Council under our Department of Human Rights will provide you the expertise advice and also speak to the countries concerned, because we have done that on many persons and it has worked. So, comrade, in the UAE, I will take interest in this particular situation since it seems to be widespread. I would ask the comrade Akosong to reach out. You could call the press secretary later on, leave your number, and we will reach out. We'll have a conversation and we will establish relationship with the UAE to be able to highlight the plight of Ambazonians and to be able to make them understand that in some way, either under domestic humanitarian law, they should provide humanitarian protection, or under international law, under their obligation, they should provide protection as asylum seekers. But this is now a global issue for our people. We had some languishing in the borders with Mexico. We engaged in some correspondences. Ambazonians wrote petitions. There were public outcry, and I think some remedy was also sought. So all Ambazonians must know, those who have left the country, that you have a right to seek and to receive protection in the country of residence. And if that is not immediately provided, we will consult with lawyers in that country, we'll consult with their foreign affairs or humanitarian departments to ensure that the plight of our people is remedied. And on the issue of the second question from our comrade in the United States, I know most of you are very angry that there has not been retribution with respect to all of these crimes that have been committed on ADF forces, including General Ivo, that some of the perpetrators are still out on TV doing interviews. They are out running businesses, and some have been bragging about the role that they played. It is not something that has stopped. It's ongoing. You hear them calling for the killing of General Ifan, the murdered Nginyam, the murdered 2 of our soldiers. There are limitations that we have. And you see, I don't believe in bravado. I don't believe in bravado. I'm a careful leader. I weigh the extent of my power and my strength, and I take my time to be able to respond. I can assure you that all those who have been responsible for the death of our forces, I'm not only talking about ADF forces, those who have engaged in corruption, embezzlement, diversion of money that has led to the premature death of soldiers, who have instilled division and infighting that has led to the death of soldiers. We will hold them accountable. Take note, their power ends on the social media and in the diaspora. Trust me that some of these people shouting, if they tell them today that Ambazonia is liberated, they can't go back because of the crimes that they have committed. I have made a personal vow on the Bui warriors. A personal vow. The graves of the 39, we don't know. We have an obligation to the parents of soldiers to return their bodies to them, even their skeletal remains, for a befitting burial, for a place of memory. That is the primary obligation of leadership. I have failed most parents. I have not returned the body of General Ivo. I have not returned the body of General Agaba, and dozens of others that have died because of the recklessness and the pursuit of unwarranted power by a tiny few within our body politics. Don't take our silence now for a weakness. We have to manage the liberation struggle in such a way it is not more chaotic. But we aren't sleeping. The last two that were killed, immediately I ordered a response, and the response was fierce, and it will continue until we bring the perpetrators to book. We will not go out and shout, but we fight on the basis that the ADF has an obligation never to attack sister forces, to attack any other Ambazonian force except that is the primacy of the existence of the ADF. The ADF was also educated. The forces were educated to identify an enemy that is responsible for the occupation. Changing the mindset of ADF forces to turn their guns against our own is very difficult. But what we have observed in the past few years, it's something that requires a total change of mindset of ADF forces to know that the primary enemy that is halting their independence is right inside the house. So, comrade, I can assure you that we are taking steps in all of those things to make sure that those on the ground and their influencers in the diaspora are held to account.
We have a call a caller waiting for you from the United States. Good afternoon, comrade in the United States.
Yeah, good afternoon, and good afternoon, Dr. Ayaba. I'm sitting here and looking at my TV, and what is written under your name is leader of the Ambazonian War, Revolution War. What does that mean? What does it mean to be the leader of the Ambazonian Revolution War? My second question is, what is your professional experience in life? I would like to know what Dr. Ayaba has done as a professional up to this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, comrade. I have answered this question before, and it's very important that people understand that I provide the ideological and strategic leadership of our war of liberation. And that is very critical for any liberation struggle. The ideological and strategic leadership that ensures that our people don't give up. And I think that is something that very few can dispute. In the long history of our struggle, even before this particular phase, it is very important that our people understand that strategic and ideological foundation of any struggle ensures long-term sustainability. Without that, it is going to be simply agitation that is going to lead to stagnation and a resignation from many people. So that is what I provide, and I continuously provide that in terms of our defense, in terms of our public diplomacy, in terms of galvanizing, identifying, defining, and naming the different facets of our resistance. In terms of my professional life, I always have kept my professional life out of politics for several reasons. But it is also important for you people to know that in terms of profession, I have worked as a research scholar in one of the biggest institutes here in Norway. And I leave it to that because of the sometimes blackmail. I have also been a consultant in one of the one energy company. So there are a lot of things I do in my professional life that are relevant also in this struggle. And I think that I continue to provide professional counsel in different areas, in different disciplines, to different sectors of our society. The nature of our struggle has made it impossible for such clarity to be in the public discourse. And I want that Ambazonians should always see me as a leader. We should not always attach those accolades that have been the premise of recognition within the colonial space. That remains a private issue to myself and my family. But my professional life has also informed in a very significant way my style of leadership, the content of my leadership. And I continue to improve on my knowledge basis to be able to help the Ambazonian people to get out of this situation of occupation.
Do you have time for 2 more questions, sir?
Yes, sir.
All right, sir. Let's take this. This person has been calling from the ground.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, comrade.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, comrade. Go ahead and ask Dr. Ayaba your question, please.
Yeah, I wish to ask His Excellency Dr. Cho Ayaba for the question, but let me just go straight to my question. Yeah, he talked about the forces as tomorrow was going to. Yeah, you spoke about the 1st October, how the preparations are going on.
Can you reduce the volume of your TV set behind you and just speak directly on your phone?
No, my TV volume is very far down. It's not high.
Or move away from your TV and just speak directly from your phone.
Just go ahead. We are listening to you. We understand you.
Yes, my TV is far down, and I want to ask a question with the issue of the forces on the ground. Please, we wish to know whether they cannot use another strategy, because he talked about improved strategy on the forces in order to combat the enemy. And this improved strategy, some of the suggestions that we sometimes wrote and tabled were that if they break all the breaches that are linking Republic and Ambazonia, and then all forces militarize all the strategic areas in Ambazonia, all the junction, all the light, because we control more than 95% of our territory. But he did mention of 80, which I am on the ground. We're both from one place to the other. We know many things that is going on. So I'm happy to meet with him to speak now. So the question that the breaking of the bridge cannot be an added factor that could help curb the situation of like infiltration into Ambazonia land. So that's the question I wish to know from him.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. You want to go ahead, sir? We don't have any other caller
right
now.
Thanks a lot, comrade, and stay safe wherever you are. All those things are factored in our defense discussions. Sometimes I know we look at these things like, all right, maybe if we pop out all of the bridges, it will stop or slow them. It will not stop them in any way. But there are things that will factor them in our strategic thinking. So some of let me not go into details because some of them are examined, but I think it's a wonderful idea, and we will consider those proposals. You can also reach out in the background so that that could be discussed further.
Thank you very much, sir. We don't have any other question. I want to ask you, you've talked about, in conclusion, you've talked about the necessity for consolidation and stabilization of the ground. You want to take this last one and then you just answer the question?
That's fine. That's fine. Yeah.
Comrade, I think you're calling from Ireland. How you doing?
Fine. I just want to ask Dr. Cho this question. Can you hear me?
Go ahead, sir. The leader is listening.
Yes, I just want to ask Dr. Cho this question. We are so blessed with so much natural and human resources. Would he not use this as a means to entice other major players to assist in the to come on the negotiation table with the Swiss? Because diplomacy, nothing goes for nothing. If he can bring if this can entice them to come, because after the independence, we need a lot of construction, planning and construction. Can this not be a strategy for him to use to bring in other strong states like the United States and other countries on the negotiation table? Thank you.
Thank you very much. What I wanted to ask you, which you attach this to your question, is you've emphasized the need for forces to consolidate and stabilize in order to create space for the building of prototype institutions that gives our people an alternative and a sense of independence. What is your take now in terms of the implementation of the stabilization, of the consolidation and the stabilization program in creating that space for Ambazonia? This is our last question.
Yes, I would take the comrade's question after yours. Thanks, comrade, calling from Ireland. I will factor your own question into my answer. There has been improvement in terms of consolidation and stabilization. One of the greatest tragedies in liberation struggles is to just keep fighting without a plan to consolidate and stabilize. Because the danger is if you just keep fighting without establishing prototype institutions that will attract the population will rely constantly on the existing or collapsing institution of the occupying power. And that reliance in services, it also attaches their soul to the occupier. So, but if you start that also early, you are going to create a big problem within the liberation space, because you'll be creating alternative centers of power that become competitive and look more like governance rather than liberation. But fighting for close to 5 years has shown us that there are times we've taken over areas and just moved and went forward. And enablers have engineered the regime to come back, take it over, we come back, fight again, take it over. But we wasted us a lot of time. After the incidences that led to the loss of a lot of grounds in Fako, in Meme, in Manyu, we now redesign the consolidation and stabilization. And for us in the AGOVC, that is very important, very critical. We don't care You know, sometimes you hear questions. I think there was a question posed by somebody that, you know, the ADF has become stagnant. No, it has not. The last 3 days, we sent people for a mission, a 3-day mission. We are focused on consolidation and stabilization. And within that, you know, being able to design a system for offensive action. And we embrace others who come into it with offensive.
Power off.
So at this particular stage, we will continue with a two-pronged approach. Consolidate the gains that we have made, stabilize the liberation space by creating these institutions that our people begin to believe in them, you know, and providing little services and changing our approach and relationship with international humanitarian organization to the level of professionalism where it begins to convey a message of dealing with a state or dealing with state institutions. They don't want to enter into a place they are meeting commanders under a bridge. They are meeting commanders under, you know, hiding in the bushes. You want to enter a space, you are talking with our commanders, sitting in a place that is liberated, that shows some sense of security. That conveys a powerful message because the international community has a lot of data from these humanitarian organizations. What is going on the ground are sometimes not independent researchers going in there. These researchers are embedded in these humanitarian organizations who gather data and pass them over to institutes who analyze the data and then develop positions and policies. So consolidation is critical also to assure our people that it's not just hit and run, that you see there is an emerging state, and that emerging state can only be seen in the kinds of institutions that are created in areas that are under our control. So I'm very confident in this. And now, how are we going to protect these places? And I remind our people never to forget this journey. These things are not done in the abstract. Remember the journey, each stage of the journey. And that goes to the question that the comrade asked, what does leader of liberation means? I think the office had put up a picture of a gas bottle written on it, sick. I would like if you can put up that stuff again. That was, I think, 2017 when we were trying to destroy the Congress Hall, Bamenda, because the Congress Hall was a space where La République used it almost as a military barrack, and we had put a lot of these tanks, and so we got these stuff to attempt. I'm talking here with respect now to the technology of IEDs. You know, we also looked at, and many of you might have forgotten that we undertook operations in Douala, and I know I forgot the question of our dear comrade who asked about taking the war over there. We undertook operations in Douala because we realized our resources in terms of hydrocarbons were being exploited and stored in there, and we wanted to take them out with the technology of IEDs. And we fell off from that technology, entered into assault rifles when I called for our people to sponsor the buying of assault rifles because they are critical for the defense of our soldiers and our communities. And later on, we introduced the what we call the RPG, because La République immediately started introducing, you know, heavy powered armor cars, and we saw the RPG as the antidote. And we saw when General Ivo was entering into the territory and people were questioning that it was fake. You know, we introduced that, and later realizing that the kind of vehicles they were bringing in were really powerful. It was difficult to find the heads of the RPGs, and so we reverted again when I said the way to stop La République encroaching into our villages and killing our people was to invest in the technology of the IEDs, and that also proliferated across the territory, and we also realized the reduction in the massacres in different places. Now, we have also talked about assault rifles, machine guns. If you note the amount of machine guns that have been bought now in the territory, you will be shocked. If we assemble all the brigades carrying machine guns, you will be shocked. some seize from La République, most both. Why? Why do you need it? Machine gun is critical to stop a motorized unit of the enemy. Why the IEDs can slow them, why it can pop them up, machine gun can be used to defend areas. That works for consolidation. It works for the overall strategy of stabilization. And I think we need to increase the number of machine guns. We need to do that. And one of the greatest thing in this struggle is that though there is a perception of fighting and stuff, those soldiers are collaborating. And I said this last time, the first machine gun that No Pity had was bought by Alabukam. And I was asking when they were shipping it, I said, who's having this stuff? They said, No Pity. I said, okay, you know him well? He said, yes. Hope he's not an enemy for us. He said, no. You know, I will not go into details of others that are being going around from different barracks, you know, ADF moving into other barracks of different forces. This is the era of machine gun, continuation of IEDs, because in your question of consolidation, machine guns are critical. There are spaces where we are so confident in those spaces, we move across long distances guided by this, because when it sounds, La République knows that there is an established force well docked in to defend captured and liberated area. And I encourage our people to believe in the consolidation and stabilization. We must, in the establishment of the state of Ambazonia, evolve in our strategic thinking. While we continuously assault isolated units, reinforce barracks of the enemy across the territory, we must be able to hold areas, begin to establish institutions that our people begin to fall in love with. We begin to provide services so that we move our people from depending on the enemy and depending on us. That's what it's called independence. That's what it means by independence. Independence is not you are fighting and depending on the services of the enemy. That is still dependency, and that means occupation. And that holds true too for the comrade who talks about natural and human resources. Let me start with human resources. Ambazonians I have one of the finest human resource agents within the Ambazonian Governing Council who advise me on key issues. Those who are highly connected with development agencies, with engineers that are critical for a new Ambazonia of tomorrow. And we have just begun work on assessing our potentials in terms of natural resources. I think I spoke last time about the potential in Rio de Rey when I talked about only the amount of hydrocarbons in Rio de Rey is enough to provide every Ambazonian household with $75,000 a year. That is huge capital that you can invest in education, in infrastructure development, and the creation of opportunities for millions of people. In terms of our human resources too, they are scattered across the globe. The direct foreign investment that is done by Ambazonians who are in exile is the only reason why Ambazonia has not, been totally destroyed. The human resource that we have out that is responsible for the education of our children, is responsible for the health of our mothers, our communities, our families, responsible for putting roofs over the houses of our parents, will be the human resource that we are going to harness in the future to ensure that we can kick Ambazonia off the ground. And as I said the last time, the pull and push factor that a producer of arrow in Ejagam, wants to find a market where you don't just dump the goods at a very cheap rate, but when we have the vast amount of Ambazonians who are out here, the government of Ambazonia will be able to establish trading opportunities between the producers of arrow in Ejagam area with buyers out here in the United States or out here in Europe at a price that is commensurate to the investment made by those who have produced that stuff. And so if there is a working relationship between the government and the people entrust and believe in the government will facilitate such opportunities that if you produce Gari somewhere in Alabukam in my village, it will be possible to sell it somewhere in Oslo at a price that can make you continue to cultivate cassava, and you'll be able to feed your family and feed the community. So we have enormous human resources that we are going to tap into to lift our country from the state of stagnation to that of flourishing state. And yes, we are using these human and natural resources as a diplomatic tool. Also, I will not go into it, but comrade, be rest assured that when you enter diplomacy, you don't tell the diplomat that you see, I have a lot of this. You say, listen, the stability of Ambazonia will be guaranteed by the huge natural resources that are available, which we think, if properly harnessed, if properly managed, will not be a resource curse, but will be an asset for the friends of Ambazonia and Ambazonian people. And they are also interested in, you might have huge natural resources, but a populace that is not educated. So we also talk about, the higher level of literacy in Ambazonia, the higher intellectualism in the Ambazonian people, and the quality of the kinds of people that are already available to be able to turn the sunlight into energy that is going to light every home across the territory, environmental protection, and they are listening and they are seeing their own interests. And sometimes you don't really know why they are calling you the next day, they are supporting you. It's because, they have a vested interest in the outcome of your struggle. Because what is the alternative? A decadent political system in Yaoundé that is a guarantor of insecurity, instability, a dying regime, which we see today. One has just been overthrown in Guinea, a collateral in terms of the international financial institutions that have been pumping billions of dollars, and we have destroyed their collateral in terms of security, and they are unable to pay those debts. So if you will pitch Ambazonia in terms of us articulating the human and natural resources and the possibility of guarantor of stability and continuity of transaction at level of the international system, and the protection of human rights, democratization, all the values that we embody, to a country that for the past 60 years cannot provide hospital to its people, cannot provide security to its people, cannot even fight terrorist organizations in the north of its country, has stagnation in terms of governance, total bullying, killing, torture as an MO in terms of governance. Who would you bat for? You will bat for the fledgling, vibrant space that is going to guarantee international transaction, that is going to be a harbinger for security and stability, that's going to be a hope for millions of people across the globe. And it's been demonstrated in the way we've conducted ourselves in our liberation struggle, and the world is going to pitch for us if we just stick together, do the right thing, and support the leadership I provide for the moment, to give you the opportunity in the nearest future to be able to decide the future of your country and those who will govern, and you entrust, your future in their own hands.
And with that, we have come to the end of this episode of the interview. Leader of Ambazonia War of Independence, Dr. Ayaba, we want to thank you for your continuous leadership, for your inspiration, for your vision, and for your belief in the goodness and kindness of the Ambazonian people. Sir, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Thank you so much talking. Thank you so much talking to the Ambazonian people and taking questions from the public directly. We are very grateful.
Thanks a lot, Mr. PS, for your service to our people. Thanks to our people. I wish you all the best wherever you are. Happy Independence Day in advance. Live together, fight together, and I'm definitely sure, as I said in New York, all of us Ambazonians will be proud citizens of a country that we have helped to engineer.
Have a great evening, sir.
Likewise, sir.
And to our Asian technicians and the studio team, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to be able to have this program today. You all have a blessed Sunday evening. Thank you very much.
here to tell the United Nations that the land they mortgaged to Cameroon will be recaptured by the brilliant people of Ambazonia.
Right! Yes!
That the complicity they had with the United Kingdom will be dampened. That your spirit, the indomitable spirit that has led you from your homes right here to this plaza, will not be extinguished by the banality of evil installed in our homeland. That the spirit that has awakened from the dusty street of Mutengene to the alleys of Bamenda will not be squashed by the brutality of Cameroon, the complicity of the United Nations, and the utter silence of the United Kingdom. For the blood of our people spilled for those who've gone before us. We stand like valiant soldiers to lay our lives to ensure that their blood wasn't spilled in vain. That they didn't die in vain. That the mothers who scream for their daughters, the fathers who are on shore where their kids are detained, wouldn't mourn in vain. I have come here as a soldier of the revolution. I have come here to assure you that this is just the first step to internationalize our struggle, to make the international community understand our pain, the pain of the mothers, the yearning of the fathers, and the doubts plastered on the faces of our kids, that the land, the 43 square meter land that we own, will not be mortgaged, will not be taken by any other country. That we are ready, that we will fight block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood, until the day, as the last speaker said, we will be able to install a government in Boya, a government for the Ambazonians, a government by the Ambazonians, that is going to speak for us, back for us, make treaties for us. We are not going to allow an alien dominating power from Yaoundé to decide our future, decide the curriculum of our education, decide which language we speak in our courts. And if the lawyer said no, right from here in New York, we send a message to Yaoundé that we are ready for the gendarmes, the bee, and all the evil spirits that have been installed in our homeland. That we will give our life for a free Ambazonia. That if this country was built on the blood of people from distant places, we are ready as soldiers of the revolution to make sure that one day, just one day, we have a homeland to call our own, a place to dwell in peace, a place where we as a people can decide our destiny. You've just got started. It's a long journey. Liberation is not a walk in the park, and I want you to be ready. Do not believe soothsayers who say you are just going to have it on a platter of gold. It's going to be a hard struggle. But the footprints you leave here today will be followed by those after us. They will know we were here. They will know we fought for them. They will know we died for them. They will know we did our part. And so they will use the same rope map to be able to inhabit a free country. If that's the only thing we can give our children, let's do it for Mother Ambazonia. I want to thank your leadership. I want to thank all those who've made it possible for me to be here. Together as a people, we will fight together, go to jail together, so one day we may be free together. Come on!